In today's video, I'm going to show you how I upload a commercial real estate lease into SharePoint and then extract details from that lease and put those details in a spreadsheet. Hi, I'm Ryan Schweihart, founder of Whole Heart Impact. I help businesses with all things HubSpot related and connect their other business processes with Zapier. In today's video, like I mentioned, we'll get started by showing the spreadsheet, and then from there I'm going to upload the commercial real estate lease into a SharePoint folder. I'm not going to necessarily show the lease, but just know that the lease is about 40 pages or so long. There's some information that's been modified, other information that's actually from a real lease itself. And so we'll upload the lease into SharePoint, then we'll let the automation run. We'll see the output of the details into the spreadsheet. Then I'll break down how the Zap works or the automation works. And then after that, at the end, I'll touch on some different use cases or ways to think about using this that I don't necessarily touch on specifically in this video. And that'll be it. So let's take a look at the spreadsheet itself. So if I hop over here, I'll refresh this page. You'll see that this spreadsheet is essentially blank. We've got our column headers in there. That's important to have set up prior to or in creating the automation itself. But then I've got the SharePoint folder here, and I'm just going to drag the lease I mentioned into the SharePoint folder. By doing so, the automation or the Zap is looking for any new files that get uploaded to this specific folder. And so whenever that happens, the automation will trigger and run. It should be fairly quick. So I'll hop back over into the spreadsheet and show you a little bit about the columns that we have listed here. So we've got tenant name, lease commencement date, lease start date, lease end date, the monthly rent rate, the tenant notice address, the payment due dates. Yeah, so there's a handful of columns, a couple handfuls of columns that are here that the person that I'm doing this for wants me to extract some of these details for a number of leases that they have rather than needing to go through them one by one manually. This last column here will just be a link to the lease that is uploaded into SharePoint. So let me try refreshing the page to see if it's done quite yet. Now I'm going to pause this for just a moment, and then I'll resume the video whenever the information has been populated. Okay, so here we are with the information that ChatGPT extracted from the lease itself and put into the spreadsheet. So we've got the tenant name that came through, we've got the lease start date, we've got the lease end date, which is essentially 5 years after the start date. There's a little bit of formatting issue that could be cleaned up either in the prompt itself or on the spreadsheet. I can verify that that rent calculation is correct. So we've got another run that came through. So I was troubleshooting some things previously, but that was just a leftover automation run that came through. It extracted the tenant notice address, which is correct. And yeah, it extracted some of the other information. All looks good. Security deposit looks good. And then if I were to click on this link, it would take me to the PDF itself. So that's pretty much it. Let me dive into how the automation actually works. So I guess really the first thing that I need to show is how to set up an assistant in ChatGPT. So if you go to platform.openai.com, you have the ability to set up your developer account. Just follow the instructions or Google it. There's going to be good information, good resources out there. But I'm specifically on this assistance portion, and I've already created the assistant for the extract lease details, but let me show you what it looks like. I've gone ahead and given it a name. The instructions is the piece that you may want to play around with and may need to tweak as you try to implement it yourself. But basically, all that I'm saying is extract the following values from commercial real estate lease that is uploaded. I want you to extract all of the following information. Then I've essentially got the same column names that we have from the spreadsheet listed here with a little bit of added information for things like the rent amount. So the rent amount is usually the price per square foot multiplied by the total square footage from the lease divided by 12 to get it in that monthly amount. So depending on what is needed, you may need to tweak the prompt. Another thing that I'll point out is I was having a little bit of trouble with the tenant address for notices. And so I went ahead and was a little more specific with where to find that. And there's also some words preceding the tenant notice address that I wanted to further give it so that it would find the right address. Since I made that tweak, it hasn't messed up finding that address in subsequent test runs. So that's the main thing with the instructions. For the model itself, me personally, with something like a 40-page lease, GPT 3.5 wasn't quite enough input window or context for it to go through that much information. And so previously I was using just GPT-4 Turbo, but just yesterday they released GPT 4o, which I believe stands for Omni, and they kind of suggest that that's actually more efficient and cheaper from the token usage and stuff like that. So I've gone ahead and toggled to the GPT 4o. I haven't tested it extensively, but that's what I'll likely use moving forward. You'll want to go ahead and toggle on the file search. I also have the code interpreter toggled on as well. I believe in making the calculation for the rent amount due per month. This code interpreter is going to be needed, and then I haven't really adjusted any of the other settings. So that's the OpenAI setup, kind of on the developer side. Now you'll have to pay for each interaction, even with a pro plan, but the cost of each one of these runs is pennies, and so to me it seems worth it. So now we get into the Zap itself. It's just a simple 4-step Zap. This is actually a replay or a recap of the run that we just did. The first trigger of the Zap itself is going to be a new file within SharePoint. So it's watching a certain folder. If a new file is put into that folder, it's going to trigger the automation to run. Then I've got the conversation step with the assistant that we just set up. Then this third step is essentially to take kind of the free-form output that ChatGPT provides us and put it into more structured data. So that way, as we go to put that into an Excel sheet, it's a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit cleaned up. So that way, it eliminates a lot of the text from things like the currency amount and the dates and that type of thing. So diving into each step specifically, it has the folder that's being watched. So down below here, it's got you map to your site and the folder that you would like to watch. And then the data that came out is actually, I'll hop into the edit mode itself. That's a little more user-friendly. That's what you're going to see whenever you set up the account. So setup's still the same, but walking through the steps specifically. So whenever you path to your site, so the trigger that I have is the new file in folder. So go ahead and select that, then map to your account, then set up the trigger step, map to your site, map to the folder that you want to watch, and then the second step is where we use the assistant that we created. You're going to use ChatGPT. There's also an OpenAI portion. So if I were to type here and you were to search something like OpenAI, you'd see this. That's not what we want to use. We want to use ChatGPT. That will give us the ability to interact with the assistant that we just created. So hopping into the second step, if I delete that, in the action itself, we have please extract the lease details based on your instructions. So we built a lot of it out in the assistant, so that way we don't have to do too much customization within the Zap itself. And so you just map to the assistant that you create. So whenever you select this drop down, you should see it available for you. You don't really need to populate anything else. Likely all this stuff's populated in the assistant. You can overwrite what's populated in the assistant with these options here, but I just went ahead and made sure that everything was set up as I wanted within the assistant. Then the new files, this is a big one. So we want to go ahead and map to the previous file, the file that we uploaded in the first step. So whenever you go here and you click new file, you're going to search for it and you're going to select this file exists but not shown. That's what you want to go ahead and place in this new file section, and that's it. So the instructions again are within the assistant. Whenever we run this step, it's going to extract that lease information. So if we were to test it, we'd see kind of some of the large text that we get in these blocks. And so that's where we need this third step to extract structured data. So previously we used the conversation with assistant step, and then now in this third step we're going to extract structured data. And then for the action itself, I just went ahead and mapped the full response from the previous step in the unstructured text portion. Right now I've got GPT 3.5. I could do, yeah, so they have GPT-4 Turbo available now. I don't think it's necessarily required because it should be pretty straightforward. But if you need to, you can use GPT-4 Turbo or GPT-4o for this portion. Got the temperature at 0, and this portion here for the description, it will be structuring data extracted from real estate lease. So I went ahead and put in these values to extract as again the column names from more or less the column names from the spreadsheet itself. So you'll go ahead and input all of those, and then in these bottom portions here you can give it more instructions of like what data type that you want it to be. I don't think I did anything other than making sure that these values were required and mapping the data type. I played around with, for the rent amount due, providing some more instructions here, but I went ahead and removed that and put those instructions in the assistant itself just so that there's less to kind of keep track of or maintain. So that's all that's being done here is determining what data type you want it to be. And then this fourth step is adding a row to table in Microsoft Excel. So for the event, we have add row to table. Then in the action step, we go ahead and map to the table itself. And yeah, so by having the column names in Excel, we get these options available for us to map to and go ahead and map to all the previous structured data that we just created in the third step. For the link to lease, you may have to kind of customize this to where you're using the server relative URL, but you're also getting some of the main text of the base URL to go ahead and hard code in there. That's pretty much it as far as the automation itself. And so, yeah, I mean, the use cases are numerous, I guess. So this can also be done within Google Drive and Google Sheets. So in a very similar manner, you would have kind of the same setup, but instead of doing SharePoint, you do Google Drive. Instead of Microsoft Excel, you'd use Google Sheets. But the assistant and all that stuff would be the same. Instead of taking this information and putting it into a spreadsheet, you could put it into Airtable or something like that. Or what I'd maybe suggest or prefer would be getting this information into HubSpot in some way, whether that's into a deal itself or into a company record if you were to create custom properties and then map this information to be put into HubSpot itself. That could be done as well. If you have any questions whatsoever about this process or anything that I went over, need any help setting it up, just let me know. Reach out to me directly, put a comment in the video below. And if you'd like to see maybe what I mentioned with the HubSpot connection or something like that, it's a little more robust, but not that much more robust. So just let me know and I can put together some information on how to do that. Bye for now.